The following program contains graphic images and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
It's the week of August 21st, 1995. In Los Angeles, it's mostly sunny with temperatures in the mid-80s. Seal's Kiss from a Rose takes the #1 spot on the Billboard charts, and the movie Mortal Kombat is tops at the box office. A 96-year-old photographer, Alfred Eisenstadt, who took the famous VJ Day in Times Square photo known as The Kiss, dies. Software program Windows 95 debuts and will go on to sell 7 million copies in its first 7 weeks at $210 a box. Meanwhile, in a courtroom in Los Angeles, the trial of the century continues to draw a worldwide television audience as the families of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman witness the defense winding down its case against the man accused of murdering their loved ones. The People versus O.J. Simpson continues. As the trial of the century moves into its final phase, the defense once again goes after Detective Mark Fuhrman. It unveils a much-anticipated audio tape of Fuhrman using the N-word and proving him to be a liar. The question is, will the jury hear it? I'm Roger Cossack, and this is OJ25.
All right, let's launch into the McKinney matter. This is in the vein of a 402 hearing. This is evidence being offered by the defense with an objection by the prosecution. And I'll hear from the defense first. All right, Ms. McKinney, would you come forward, please?
Did you have occasion to meet Officer Mark Fuhrman in 1985?
Yes. At the time, I was working on something to do with women in law enforcement. It was around that time that he told me he was an officer and had strong feelings about whether or not women should be on the Los Angeles Police Department and working specifically in areas of high crime.
Did he tell you anything about any organization he was active in with respect to that issue?
Yes, he mentioned Men Against Women, which is actually policemen against police women, commonly called MAO.
Your general practice was to tape record the meetings between yourself and Officer Fuhrman.
Yes.
What was your purpose in tape recording them?
I needed to hear his words for dialogue purposes to be able to construct accurate characters so that they would be clear.
So what you put into the transcript were his words?
Yes.
Did you edit his words at all in the process of transcribing the tapes?
No.
Was the word ever used?
Yes.
You say on your oath that you have not addressed any black person as a or spoken about black people as in the past 10 years, Detective Fuhrman.
That's what I'm saying, sir.
The screenplay that you were contemplating was to be a fictional story, was it not?
It was to be a fictional story based on reality.
So is it fair to say then that other than the information given to you by Officer Fuhrman, you had no other facts or sources to corroborate the things Detective Fuhrman told you?
As well as the other information that people had given me to let me know that it existed.
We don't need black prosecutors who are going to look away at evidence that clearly shows someone is being racist and having an axe to grind against black people and standing with that person in an effort to win a case. No, black people are not riding with Christopher Darden on that.
The views expressed by Detective Fuhrman on the tapes, you don't know that those views reflect his true views about African Americans, do you?
What's on the tape is what Officer Fuhrman said to me.
Okay.
I don't know if he was lying to me or saying anything else. It's what he said.
Christopher Darden is mad that black people were not like, oh, we're going to support you in the way that we supported OJ because we know that you're just doing your job. He wasn't just doing his job. He was participating in what looked like a cover-up.
Was there a subplot regarding racial conflict amongst police officers?
No.
Because of lots of missteps, like lying police officers. You know, that for any jury, it should be a problem for any jury, but certainly for black people and our problematic or precarious past with the criminal justice system, that is going to make a major impact on how you see things in terms of guilt and innocence. It just is.
Could you describe the context in which he described this arrest?
He was discussing a suspect that he had arrested.
Have all of your interviews with Officer Fuhrman been preserved?
No. I inadvertently recorded another interview over one tape and a similar situation with another tape.
We do have a real problem with the accuracy. In a case where we are leaning on every word and every nuance and the context in which it's made to make arguments to a jury, it's extremely important that we have a very accurate transcript, one that gives the entire context in the most accurate manner possible. Obviously, we don't have that in this case. Mr. Yeoman cites this as an example of how Kathleen Bell is corroborated. So under what did you arrest him? I didn't arrest him under anything. Just took him to the station, ran him for prints. Gave them to the detectives to compare with what they've got in the area. I'll probably arrest a criminal that way.
They have the opportunity perhaps to plant evidence to mislead the detectives as time goes by.
I couldn't answer that, sir.
They have time. This is no part of your training, I take it.
Planting evidence? No, it isn't.
Something was possibly not right here with respect to the role that the police played. And in any other case, this would not have been exposed, but because O.J. Simpson had the resources to bring in this dream team of attorneys, we are finally now exposing the types of things that people in our community have complained about for generations.
It is offered not just to prove conduct, that is, to support the inference that Detective Fuhrman would have altered or moved evidence in this case or presented perjured testimony in this case. More important, it is being used to challenge the credibility of a witness who has testified, to assist the jury in assessing his credibility. After we've read all of these transcripts and listened to all of these tapes and come to the sickening realization of who Mark Fuhrman really is, Los Angeles' worst nightmare, probably the greatest liar since Ananias. But the jury has only seen a very polished and professional performance that was carefully orchestrated, in which Detective Fuhrman sounded more like a choir boy. In one of the tapes, he says, "I'm the only one who knows how to testify." We intend to call Detective Fuhrman to the stand. I know that he was not excused. He is subject to further cross-examination. If he does invoke the Fifth Amendment, that simply means he is now no longer available as a witness. In fact, I'm looking forward to hearing that argument addressed to the jury, for the prosecution to get up and say, ladies and gentlemen, all of this stuff you heard on the tapes of Detective Fuhrman admitting that he lied, that he planted evidence, that he tore up driver's licenses, you shouldn't trust that, because Detective Fuhrman exaggerates.
I'll hear from the people.
The content of these tapes is so repugnant and so offensive that this may well be the most difficult thing I've ever had to do as a prosecutor. And as a citizen, I am deeply offended, and I'm shocked, and I'm disgusted. What they're looking to do is bring in a whole bunch of inflammatory material on a witness who had a very small part in this case, whose part they want to pump up as big as they can so they can make this issue as big as they can, to totally divest the jury from this case. And the admission of this evidence is, in essence, telling the jury, disregard the case. Look somewhere else.
May I ask, how could you
Mr.
arrive at
Cochran,
just these two,
wait,
Your Honor?
We're not revisiting that at this point. The point is, at some point in time, it becomes cumulative. So you will have, in the record, after Bell, Terry, and McKinney, you will have 3 witnesses that that you can reasonably argue from that Detective Fuhrman is A, a liar, and B, a racist.
For this judge to rule that only 2 of those incidents are admissible is outrageous, it's specious, and it's unspeakable.
All right, the defense may call their next witness, Mr. Cochran.
Thank you very kindly, Your Honor. We'll call Dr. Christian Reichardt.
All right. Mr. Reichardt, you come over here and stand by the court reporter, please, and face Mrs. Robertson, the clerk.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that...
On the date of Sunday, June 12th, 1994, did you receive a phone call from Mr. O.J. Simpson in the evening hours of that day?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us approximately what time that call was?
That was about 9 o'clock in the evening. He seemed more jovial. He seemed relaxed. He was packing his bag to go to Chicago. And we were talking about the fact that he's going to come back.
Wait. Doctor, please listen very carefully to the question. It was just describe his tone of voice, not what he said.
Okay.
All right, juries to disregard the testimony regarding what was said. Mr. Cochran.
During this conversation, without telling us the substance of the conversation, did you and Mr. Simpson make any plans to get together later in that week?
Yeah, we talked about getting together.
No, that's not here, sir. You can say yes or no, young.
Yes or no?
Yes.
All right, you made some plans?
Yeah.
And, Doctor, what date, if any, were you going to get together after that date?
Well, you can answer the question.
The following Wednesday.
All right. And on the following Wednesday, which would be, I guess, Wednesday, June 15th, what were you and Mr. Simpson going to do?
We were going to go and have dinner.
What were you going to do, sir?
We were going to go and have dinner.
Did the defendant, in your opinion, seem depressed over his failing relationship with Nicole Brown?
At times, yes.
In fact, he seemed upset. He was upset with Nicole Brown during the weeks leading up to that phone call. Is that correct?
At times, yes.
And he was upset because Nicole Brown didn't want to see him any longer. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
The defendant had been upset because Nicole Brown had changed her mind about having a relationship with him.
She changed her mind frequently about having a relationship with him or not having a relationship with him, and that's what he was upset about.
If she was really mad at him, she would say, oh, well, I'm going to go out with so-and-so. And she'd get very graphic, according to OJ. You know, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do this with this guy, I'm going to do that with this guy. And it really could push OJ's buttons.
You told us a few moments ago that Nicole Brown was also your friend. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is it your opinion, Dr. Reichardt, that Nicole Brown deserved to have had her throat cut?
Sustained. It's not an appropriate question, Mr. Darden. Have a seat, Mr. Cochran.
Sometimes attorneys will ask questions that they know are going to draw an objection, but they still want to get the question out, mainly because they want to say something to the jury. And here, Christopher Darden is using that technique to really evoke some emotion from the members of the jury on how violent and vicious this crime was. So although there's an objection from the defense that's sustained by the judge, perhaps on the basis of it being argumentative, it still got the point across.
You understand that the defendant is an actor, correct?
No, check that.
Overruled.
Overruled.
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us whether or not he was acting or putting on an act when you spoke to him on the telephone?
Can one ever?
Well, you know him.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he was not acting. Can
To
I
you, he
prove
wasn't
that?
acting.
Excuse me?
To you, he wasn't acting.
Nope.
So you can tell then.
Argumentative. Rephrase the question.
Dr. Reichardt, there were times when Miss Nicole Brown Simpson wanted to get back with the family, right?
That's correct.
And and there were times when Mr. Simpson wanted to get back. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they tried to get together and make it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And they didn't make it. Isn't that correct?
They didn't make it.
And after they didn't make it, you became aware that Mr. Simpson was seeing Paula Barbieri. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And he seemed happy and more relaxed, right?
That's right.
That's what you told us here today, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Nothing further.
In the basin of the sink was a broken drinking glass.
And Mr. Cochran, you may call your next witness.
Thank you very kindly, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll next be calling Detective Ken Burris to the stand. Detective Burris?
I do.
At some time in the morning hours of June 13th, were you assigned some duties in connection with the O'Hare Plaza Hotel in Chicago, Illinois?
Yes, I was.
Did you and your partner have occasion to go up to room 915?
Yes, Detective Bongiorno and I, accompanied by Mr. Phillips, went to room 915.
We called the Chicago Police Department, and they sent 2 homicide detectives to that room, that very room, before it was cleaned up. Before they did anything, they secured that room.
Can you describe for the jury what, if anything, you saw in the sink of the bathroom area there of suite 915?
In the basin of the sink was a broken drinking glass.
Did you see any other remnants or shards of this glass on the so-called vanity area in and around the sink?
Yes, there were at different locations along the vanity several small, and I'll describe them as chips, because they were very small, of broken glass.
You know, he had nothing to hide. You know, he had, when he got back, he had a cut on his finger. You know, he had dropped a glass there in Chicago and cut himself.
Did you see any large towels in this same general area near the sink basin area?
Yes, on atop the vanity, directly to the right of the wash basin, was a towel that was not folded. It appeared to have been used. It was wrinkled and left on top of the vanity to the right of the basin.
And when the towel was lifted up, did you have occasion to see a washcloth or a face cloth?
Yes, I did.
Describe for the jury what you saw with regard to this washcloth or face cloth.
That washcloth had a reddish stain on it, which I suspected to be blood.
All right, now looking at 1335, what is depicted therein?
That's another photograph of the bedding for that room, and there's also depicted a red stain, which was suspect blood.
Simpson's statement had been he cut his finger in the sink because he dropped one of the glasses, and he cut his finger on it. Now, when the Chicago homicide cops got there, they found the glass. They found a little blood on the sheets. Oh, well, that's reasonable.
Could you point out the blood on the glass?
I observed no blood on the glass.
Did you visually inspect it to see if there was blood on it?
Yes, sir.
The glass is clear, correct?
Yes.
Oh, right. You saw no blood nowhere, no place?
Ask and answer.
On that glass?
Oh.
Is that correct?
I observed no blood on the glass, sir.
Did you find any blood-stained tissues inside the room?
No, sir.
Any blood-stained toilet paper at all?
No, sir.
Did you find any blood drops on the bathroom floor?
No, sir.
Find any drops of blood around the wash basin on the vanity?
No, sir.
Did you find any drops of blood on the carpet?
No, sir.
Find any next to the bed?
No, sir.
Did you find any on the telephone?
No, sir.
These particular glasses were extremely thick. Well, how did he cut his finger? I can't break the damn glass. He says he did.
He put his hand out to shake his hand, and Detective Bayonetta backed away and stated, "I'm not going to shake your hand. You are a traitor."
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know quite how to tell you this. You have a rather unusual distinction. As a sequestered jury, as you know, you've been sequestered since mid-January. And as of yesterday, you have surpassed the amount of time that the Manson jury, if you recollect from 20 years ago, was in sequestration. So some kind of a dubious record, I'm sure. I want you to know that we're very cognizant of the demands that we've made upon you. I know that this has not been an easy experience for any of you. Probably fun for about the first 8 hours, and then after that it became real tough.
I did not want to be involved at all originally. We met in the parking lot at Dodger Stadium. They don't tell you anything beforehand about anything that's going to happen. All they tell you is report to this particular location at this particular time. And so I reported to the location. All the people started coming in. We all had bags because we were already told to pack because we were going to be there for a while.
I think it was the longest sequestration in U.S. history. These jurors were kept away from their family, were kept away from their friends for the entirety of the trial.
I didn't relish the idea of being locked up with people that I didn't know for that length of time. And of course, when we were first impaneled, there were a total of 24 people that were brought in, 12 jurors, 12 alternates. That's 24 different personalities all going at each other at that point in time. People started drifting to groups right off the bat. The blacks began hanging out only with the other blacks, and then the whites moved off to themselves. So I start realizing to myself, oh wow, people are already forming groups. And this was like maybe off the first time that we all sat down together.
They got really frustrated, and some of that frustration really boiled over and became public.
There were certain people that you could tell from the beginning were campaigning to be like forepersons. I think it came up real early one time. Somebody was saying, we need to think about who we want to have as a foreperson. And I think if I was in the room with that person, I think I might have even interjected that, oh man, you're jumping way too ahead of things right now. I think it's way too soon for us to even be thinking about anything of that nature. Those first few days when we're in the courtroom, although the cameras can't photograph us, we're aware of the cameras in the courtroom.
3 times today, I noticed the camera moving, and I observed on 3 occasions jurors looking up at the camera as it was moving because of the amount of noise it's making. So it either needs to be lubricated and quieted down, because if it's distracting the jurors by it swinging back and forth, it's going to go.
And also, as you're sitting there and you glance over, everybody's constantly staring at you. I started getting very, very uncomfortable feelings just from all the stares I was getting.
We sat there and we watched them every day. We just glued our eyes to them, and what are they taking notes about? And we couldn't talk to them. So you felt like you knew them, but you didn't really know them. And we're always trying to read what were they interested in, who did they like, trying to read their facial expressions. But they tended to communicate their frustration pretty visibly.
Saturday, May 27th, okay, this is a weekend day. And we went to the Santa Anita Shopping Center this morning. Everyone was given a chance to shop. As we all fanned out into small groups, we didn't intend to do a lot of shopping as we were under the assumption that we would be able to go to a movie in the shopping center. Well, as Sergeant Smith informed us after he had checked out the times of the shows, that was not going to be possible as he felt that we wouldn't get out in time to meet up with the other jurors. So instead, Dave, Smitty, and myself went to a Mexican restaurant in the mall for lunch. Smitty was cool as he allowed Dave and me to have a couple of margaritas with lunch.
This case had one element that we've never seen in any other case. In this case, the jury was sequestered for 9 months. So those jurors spent as much time behind bars as O.J. Simpson did. They were not allowed to watch television. They were not allowed to listen to the radio. There was no internet. They couldn't do anything. They were under lock and key. They couldn't talk to their friends and family. They had visiting hours. They were behind bars. They were being punished in their view.
About 7 p.m., my girlfriend arrived with the first group, and we headed immediately for my room. We were both a little nervous, as I didn't know if maybe my room might be bugged, as we didn't normally discuss matters regarding the case. Most of the jurors are showing some signs of weariness at this time, as the days seem increasingly long. I myself am actually to the point of almost exhaustion for lack of any consistent breaks or vacations over the last 6-month period, and I can only wait in great anticipation for the trial to come to a conclusion soon.
Before me right now, there is a very significant legal issue that I'm going to have to spend a considerable amount of time considering outside of your presence.
It's been exactly 191 days into sequestration, and everyone, including myself, are still showing steady signs of anguish and frustration over this long and arduous ordeal.
Each of you has shown us by your endurance and by your cheerfulness every day when you come in here that you're still with us.
No real nightly activity to be involved in, since all Deputy Kroll had found for videos is a bunch of old, non-interesting titled pictures. And of course, we're down to one video per night. And because these deputies have a tendency to try to label you a troublemaker if you start hassling them about the movie situation, I just try to go along with the program and not make waves.
I want you to know that we appreciate the burden that we've placed upon you and the demands and the restrictions that we've placed upon you. This is much worse than being in the Army, I'm sure.
Things started quieting down more. You had less boisterousness. You had, less conflict going back and forth between people.
I want you to know that each and every person involved in the prosecution and the defense of this case appreciates your sacrifices, and they will keep that in mind in the future as they prepare their examinations of witnesses, and will hopefully keep their examinations to what is absolutely necessary.
And I think when there was no smoking gun, when there was an opportunity for the jurors to say this was a race-based case, or this glove was planted, or the glove didn't fit, I think they said, why were we kept here so long? Who would do this to us?
Are the parallel line imprint impressions? Could those have come from a Bruno Magli shoe?
As OJ25 continues, the defense is unrelenting in its attack of the prosecution's case. Once again going after the work of criminalist Dennis Fung and Andrea Mazzola. The witness leading the charge, famed forensic scientist Henry Lee.
Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Henry Lee. How many PhDs work at your laboratory?
Irrelevant.
Oral.
Right this moment, I have 6 PhDs and 1 MD work in my laboratory. How many scientists altogether? We have 36 forensic scientists. They all finished their terminal degree. Now, Dr. Lee, could you please describe what it is you found on the walkway on June 25th? On June 25th, 1994, I arrived at Bundy's. I found quite a few imprint evidence which consistent with footwear imprint. In addition to those shoewear evidence, I noticed a different design, a parallel line design type of pattern. In this small picture, labeled Walkway, June 25th, 94, the center photograph of a lower set of a picture. This one consistent with a heel print, consistent with a Subsequently, Agent Bozia identified that's a Bruno magnet. Adjacent to that, have a series of parallel lines of another imprint. This parallel line shows a series linear design. It's consistent with a imprint.
Are the parallel line imprint impressions that you have identified on the envelope and the piece of paper, could those have come from a Bruno Magli shoe?
Well, it's an imprint. It's not an impression.
My
That's
apologies.
a two-dimensional pattern. This two-dimensional pattern cannot come from a Bruno magnet shoe.
Dr. Henry Lee, one of the world's most renowned experts in the area of forensic pathology, really connecting with this jury. And I have to hand it to Barry Scheck. The way he questioned him, he's arming the jury with information in the way of educating them with this brilliant expert witness, giving them everything they need to know to arrive at the verdict that the defense wants. And with Henry Lee, Barry Scheck is helping build his credibility before the jury, not with his qualifications, although he's extremely qualified to answer the questions. It's with honesty that he's doing this. Dr. Lee isn't taking the stand and claiming to know everything. He's admitting when he doesn't know the answer to a question, which makes it all the more powerful when he definitively tells the jury that there were more than one sets of men's shoe prints at the crime scene.
Could the imprint on the envelope, could that have come from Mr. Goldman's boot?
No.
How do you know that?
I studied the boot, did some measurement, and the saw pattern is completely different than this imprint.
You cannot definitively call these parallel line imprint patterns, with that exception, a shoe print. Is that correct?
That's correct.
However, are these parallel line imprint patterns consistent with coming from the Bruno Magli?
No.
Mr. Goldman's boot?
No.
Could they come from Mr. Goldman's jeans?
No.
Could they come from Mr. Goldman's shirt?
Inconsistent.
However, these parallel line imprint patterns are consistent with having come from a shoe.
Could have.
Dr. Lee, in your experience at crime scenes, have you ever seen a single assailant wear two pairs of shoes?
Argument with your right. Oh. No.
All right, now what I'm asking you though, Dr. Lee, is at the Bundy location and the evidence that came from the Bundy location.
Yes.
Were there certain instances where you saw something and it was your opinion, I can't tell whether that's an imprint or not?
Yes, sir. Okay. Some evidence, I see a pattern because I examine a picture. When you examine a picture, you examine something through photographer's camera lens. I wasn't there myself. If I see something, I can tell that's some kind of an imprint. As far as a shoe print or not, I don't know. I don't want to make an opinion on that.
You could look at some of the wounds on Nicole and say that there were two murder weapons. That was one thing that brought the defense argument on. Maybe there's a second suspect. We think there was because Henry Lee very wrongly misidentified a couple of things.
Now, were there also some items at the Bundy location where you were able to determine that it was an imprint, but you weren't sure that it was a shoe print?
Yes.
And with regard to that, would the envelope fit into that category?
Yes.
Now, with respect to the prints on the Bundy walk,
yes,
there were two parallel line prints that you saw on the walk, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And those were, in fact, shoe prints, correct?
In June 25th, yes, I did issue opinion. One definite is a shoe print.
Now, would it be fair to say, Dr. Lee, that the only items that you identified that you are certain that it is, one, an imprint,
yes,
and two, a shoe print,
yes,
are those two items on the Bundy walk?
Yes, sir.
And would it be correct to say that, in your opinion, you determined that they were in blood?
Yes.
We showed what they really were. One of them was a fold in Ron Goldman's bloody shirt. Another was actually a three-dimensional trowel mark that Henry said could have been footwear impressions.
Are you familiar, sir, with the kinds of parallel lines that are sometimes on the cuffs of men's sweatsuits?
I don't know what kind of sweatsuit you refer to. If, say, a fabric design, you have a wave pattern, that couldn't be just a parallel line. It's no other horizontal wave pattern I can see.
Okay, but if we have a parallel line, for example, on a cuff.
It may be.
Maybe, yes.
Regardless what Henry Lee says, and he knows better, I know Henry, there were no other footwear impressions, period.
The defense may call the next witness.
The defense calls Larry Regal.
All right, Mr. Regal.
Do you have an understanding of the minimum standard of practice which should be used to process crime scenes?
Yes, I do.
Do you have an opinion as to whether their processing of the crime scenes in this case fell above or below a minimum standard of practice?
Yes, I have an opinion.
And what is that opinion?
That it fell below a minimum standard.
In your opinion, is there any legitimate investigative or forensic purpose to be served by not having the criminalists at the primary crime scene for 10 hours?
No.
Are you aware of whether or not there was ever any search done in the dirt area of the Bundy crime scene for latent shoe prints?
In the reports that I was given, I found no evidence that that was done.
Do you know whether or not the Los Angeles Police Department in their crime scene trucks has equipment to conduct such an analysis?
Well, actually, there isn't any special equipment needed to look for shoe impressions in soil other than a flashlight at night.
With respect to Detective Mark Fuhrman using the inside of the condominium to sit down and write his notes, do you have an opinion on whether or not that was appropriate?
It is inappropriate to do that unless that area had been processed for evidence before that time.
Why is it important that the inside of Nicole Brown Simpson's condominium be processed in any fashion?
Because it is adjacent to, and at least in my opinion, part of the overall scene.
So let's talk specifically about blood drops. Have you reviewed the photographs that have been made available to you of the what's been called the Bundy blood drops?
Yes, I have.
And do you have an opinion on whether or not that photographic documentation that you have seen is adequate?
It is not. Every photograph of something like that that's close up, I think I mentioned this earlier, should have a ruler. And in the case of something like blood drops, should have a indication of the direction compassed, or not the direction necessarily of the movement of the blood, but of north.
Can you use this picture as an example of how that was improperly documented, at least through this picture?
There is a tag indicating a photo number. That's appropriate. What's inappropriate about that tag, by the way, is the placement of it. It is too close, and it is masking the area underneath the piece of paper, and that's too close. It could be this close if another photograph is taken without anything in it. But what is missing here entirely is a ruler and a pointer or a notation that north is to the top or to the bottom or to the side, whatever the photograph is.
Are you familiar with the testimony that Dennis Fung took the Rockingham glove inside of a bag into the Bundy crime scene to show it to Detective Lang?
Yes, I am.
Do you have an opinion on whether or not that is an appropriate technique to use?
It's my opinion that nothing should be taken back into the crime scene from one crime scene to the other.
You recognize someone there holding a brown paper bag?
Yes,
Who's that?
that's the criminalist, Mr. Fung.
And do you recall what was in that brown paper bag?
Yes, there was a glove, I believe. This is the time where he showed me the glove from Rockingham that I wanted to see.
And why did you want him to bring the brown paper bag to you over where the left-handed glove was located?
I wanted to visually compare both gloves to see if there were a possibility of a match.
And what did you determine?
In my mind, they matched.
Now, since 1989, how many homicides have you been the primary criminalist who was investigating the crime scene?
None.
And how many crime scenes, homicide crime scenes since 1989, were you a secondary criminalist or assistant criminalist investigating that crime scene?
None.
You've heard of the book Forensic Science Handbook by Richard Saperstein, is that correct?
I've heard of it.
And have you relied on portions of this book in forming opinions about crime scene investigation?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
No.
Well, isn't this one of the leading books discussing forensic evidence?
I don't know.
Have you read Richard Saperstein's other book entitled Forensic Science Handbook, Volume 3?
No, I haven't.
Are you familiar with Barry Fisher of the Crime Laboratory here in our county of Los Angeles?
Yes, I am.
And have you read this book?
Portions of it.
Is the reason for reading these books, this kind of material, is so that a criminalist can maintain current with what is going on in the forensic science community?
Not entirely. Books of this nature are never really current.
Have you rendered any analysis in this case about the actual test results and what they either show or don't show?
No, I haven't.
So what you basically testified to here are things that possibly could have happened during the crime scene processing, is that correct?
In a sense, yes, but not completely.
Your Honor, after Mr. Regal was done testifying yesterday, he came off the witness stand. He had seen Detective Van Adder sitting in the back of the courtroom during his testimony, or in the back bench there. He put his hand out to shake his hand, and Detective Van Adder backed away and stated, "I'm not going to shake your hand. You are a traitor," or a word to that effect, of that substance. "You should be ashamed of yourself. I'm a cop. You're a cop. You're pathetic. I've been a cop for 27 years, and I've never seen a cop come in and testify the way you did." Now, we want to put Mr. Regal on to state that. It's directly relevant to the bias of Detective Van Adder, of his motives. It shows it's state-of-mind evidence on Detective Van Adder as to his feeling that cops should not testify against cops.
This is ridiculous. I mean, we have really reached the most reaches I've ever seen. I'm actually speechless. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Detective Van Adder is entitled to his opinion. He's a human being and a citizen of this country, and he's entitled to his opinion. And if he wants to tell Mr. Regal, after he's completed his testimony, what he thinks of him, he's entitled to do so. And if Mr. Regal feels the need to go and cry to his lawyers about it, he can do that too. But that none of it has anything that should be involving this court's time and attention and energy, which are already sorely taxed by a very difficult and lengthy case. This is absurd.
I'm concerned that both attorneys from both sides have referred to what other people around this country may think. That causes me to believe that the lawyers are pandering to the cameras, and that causes me to believe that probably I ought to pull the plug on the cameras. Any other comment?
No, Your Honor.
All right, I'm going to sustain the objection to the recall of the witness as to that issue.
The prosecution is on the ropes. The defense continues to challenge how evidence was collected and claiming O.J. Simpson was framed. Coming up, more proof of the frame-up, says the defense, when they play the tape of Mark Fuhrman using the N-word for the jury and call him to the stand to account for himself.
Detective Fuhrman, did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?
I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
That's next on OJ25. I'm Roger Cossack.